The Lost Mine of Phandelver is among the most lauded pre-written campaigns for Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, though I often find myself wondering why. Sure, it has a relatively simple and approachable story, beginning with the players in search of a missing friend, to rooting out some ruffians in the local town, before diving headlong into a dark and mysterious cavern to snuff out the evil that lingers there. It's a fine story, if not a bit tired. But I don't think it's the story or the characters or even the gameplay that has people looking back so fondly towards this adventure. I think this one was all about timing. One thing that I want to make abundantly clear is that I have no nostalgia towards Lost Mine. I wasn't even playing D&D when it was released. Though I can recognize its pedigree without it holding a fond place in my heart, I want to see if I can contextualize the time when it was released, when a brand new era of D&D was beginning and live streams were barely even in their infancy. This is a Lost Mine of Phandelver retrospective. Being the first module to be released for 5th edition, even coming out before the player's handbook, Lost Mine had a lot to carry on its shoulders. For all intents and purposes, the starter set, which included this adventure, was the flagship product for 5e. I'm really not sure it's possible to overstate the importance that this release would have for the franchise as a whole. Coming off the back of the rather controversial 4th edition, and adopting a radically different development strategy, this could potentially be seen as a sink-or-swim moment for the game. Although by most accounts 4th edition was a commercial success and certainly still has its die-hard fans, many players were extremely critical of the design philosophies adopted at the time. Many aspects of the game, and particularly character creation, became very streamlined, which rubbed many longtime players the wrong way. The shift towards powers, as well as the drastic altering of many of the core mechanics, was seen as such a dramatic departure from the roots of the game that it spurred some of the strongest edition wars yet. This was the world that Lost Mine was born into, one where it would be responsible for answering for the crimes of the past, all the while paving a new way for the future. There is nothing remarkable about this adventure. That may sound a little harsh to many, but it really should not be all that surprising. That simply was not the adventure that Lost Mine was designed to be. Lost Mine had with it two main goals that it needed to achieve: to introduce people to 5th edition and its mechanics, and to convert veteran players over from older editions. As a result of these two objectives, which are nearly at odds with each other, Lost Mine was almost required to achieve such a level of mundanity so consistently across it as to not alienate anyone in their target audience. And glimpses of this can even be seen as early as the first encounter, the famed Goblin Ambush. This encounter actually is surprising in that the first combat scenario a new player may be faced with is technically a deadly one. Though on the face of it, this may seem like bad design, but the reality is that it actually has a dual purpose which quite elegantly serves both of the stated goals. In an effort to introduce players to 5th edition and its mechanics, every single stage of this encounter is painstakingly explained in detail in the adventure text, which genuinely is a nice touch if you're a new DM learning the game. Now is when your players will get to experience combat for the first time, and odds are you will not know how to run these creatures effectively, so the players will probably win. But even if they don't, well, you've actually introduced them to a whole series of new dimensions to the game within just the first few minutes. And to convert veteran players over from older editions, while this is certainly much more difficult to achieve, this encounter also demonstrates that 5e can be ruthless, but gives the DM more than enough freedom to resolve the scenario in a more amicable way should the players opt for that. This is something that is unlikely to occur for new players, though the text does provide more than enough detail about what the goblins know, their hideout, and any other additional details the DM may choose to share. So at first glance, while it may seem simple, what we are left with is an encounter that is, on the face of it at least, rather uninspired. It's 4 goblins in some bushes after all, but if you give it a second glance, you do see the depth that exists. The rest of this adventure plays out in a largely linear fashion with a few mostly irrelevant side quests thrown in for good measure. Cragmaw Hideout is fine, Phandalin feels familiar and cozy. I think the Red Brand subplot with Glassstaff that occurs here is actually probably the most fun part of the entire adventure, in that your actions actually have a direct impact on the overall plot, and there's even some really interesting RP opportunities down there. And there's also a Nothic, which is pretty sweet. If you contrast this with the other side quests, meeting with Agatha, Old Owl Well, Thundertree, Wyvern Tor, any connections here with the rest of the campaign or its overarching plot are tangential at best. Sure, Agatha can answer one singular question to aid the adventurers, but they may not even take on that quest at all, and all the rest of the quests sort of feel like aimless fetch missions. They don't meaningfully contribute to the narrative in a way that satisfies me or even conveys a feeling of progression. Thunder Tree does have a young green dragon though, which is pretty cool, even though it mostly functions as a means of explaining to new players that not every confrontation needs to be met with force, which, in fairness, is a great lesson to learn early on. Probably my least favorite section of this entire adventure is Cragmaw Castle, and it's kind of hard to explain why, but I will do my best. It mostly just feels like more of the exact same thing. And yes, though it is different in that the players are encouraged to don disguises and make their way through without being slaughtered, if you've been following the main quest or even some of the side quests, this almost just feels like another one tacked on. Something about Cragmaw Castle always felt to me like just one step too many of the same thing. You went to Cragmaw Hideout and saved Sildar, you went to the Red Brand Hideout and killed Glassstaff, you went to Cragmaw Castle and saved Gundren, you went to Wave Echo Cave and killed the Black Spider. Like I said, it's hard to explain. It's really always just been more of a feeling that I've had. It all just feels so samey, which is a bit of a shame in an adventure that was designed to lure in new players, but I don't know, I'm probably wrong. The final chapter, Wave Echo Cave, is fine. It is a much larger area to explore than anything the players have seen so far, but so much of it just feels unnecessary. There is a reasonable mix of monsters and traps, including a flame skull and a spectator, which can be really fun to use as a new or even veteran DM, to be honest. In addition, detailing the sound of the crashing waves is pretty cool and can be kind of offsetting to your group. But the final encounter with the big bad is a bit of a mixed bag. The tools are there and it can be a reasonable final fight if you know how to run it well, which I am almost positive no new DM will know how to do. The key to making this fight challenging is just to have the Black Spider cast darkness in the room where the fight is occurring and then actually use the giant spiders with their blind sight to actually do the killing, all the while he stands back and maybe pelting the group with some magic missiles here and there. The problem is that this was an adventure designed for new players, and most people running this will just see that darkness does not have any damage associated with it and instead just use something like Magic Missile or Ray of Frost. But that's really not going to present much of a challenge at all. The Black Spider is a challenge rating 2 creature with a measly 14 AC, including mage armor, and all of 27 hit points. Your group of 4 to 5 4th level adventurers will absolutely chew through this clown unless the DM employs some kind of a reasonable tactic, which isn't even necessarily a bad thing, really just depending on how you are running your game. One of the best things about the way that Lost Mine has positioned itself though is just how elegantly it serves as a preamble for so many of the other early campaigns. Many even have sections that explain how they can be linked together. This is a wonderful touch that makes continuing your D&D experience that much more seamless. While it may sound like I am hating on Lost Mine of Phandelver, that is really not the intention. We truly have learned so much from it, from adventure design to creature balancing to quest scope. It has taught us so much. Though I do maintain what I said at the outset, that I feel this adventure is so favored due to its timing, I cannot deny that it did execute reasonably well on its mission. It successfully conveys the experience of 5e to new players, all the while leaving plenty of room for more advanced dungeon masters to tweak and adjust things as they see fit. Though I still don't see this as anywhere near one of the truly great campaigns for 5e, it is really hard to deny what it did for the game at a time when it really needed it. It provided just enough dimensionality and decision making to make the game feel compelling. Given that this is probably the most played D&D adventure of all time, it is probably safe to say that it achieved what it set out to do. Thank you so much for watching this video. Please subscribe to the channel if you like what you saw, and check out a few of my other videos. And don't be shy to leave a comment down below letting me know if there's anything else that you'd like me to explore in D&D's history or even its future.